And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Still Curtain podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Jaggi, editor of StillCurtain.com. Joining me, as always, is Shayne Kubas, contributor for Still Curtain. We are going to preview the Steelers versus Rams game this week. Big one for the Steelers out on the West Coast. We're going to talk about some of the things that happened and some of the things that didn't happen during the bye week that we would have liked to have seen. And we'll dive first into some Steelers news. Shayne, Matt Canada remains the offensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So this really isn't news. I think most fans were hoping that it would be news at this point.
Yeah, so I feel like I'm going to relate to you a little bit here, Tommy, when I say this. I know you are a father of several children, and I feel at this point, and with the Steelers, I'm not so much mad about this. I'm just disappointed, right? Like I've gotten beyond the point of being, angry or reactionary. It's just,
Yeah.
man, you could do better for yourself, right?
Mhm.
Like I'm just upset for you at this point. And, I think that's kind of where I'm at. I know a lot of fans are very much still on the anger train, and I get it. That's just kind of how it goes, just being a fan of a team. But it's just disappointing because we know now that, like, barring whatever meeting they had behind closed doors during the bye week, changing something, we're just going to see a lot of the same stuff that's been so frustrating for 2+ years, right? Like, that's
Oh,
what's
yeah.
really disappointing to me is we're not going to
Mhm.
probably see anything that's going to change the outlook of this team for this season. They're going to have to figure it out around him and figure it out is in a way to try to win with him being the one playing, calling plays. And it's going to be really difficult. I mean, they've done it for
Mm.
2+ years now, technically. So,
Yeah.
like, they know what they need to do, I guess. But I don't think it's going to get any easier from here.
Yeah, I mean, 39 games of Matt Canada. I think we've all seen enough at this point. I think that
Yeah.
you're in the vast minority if you want Canada to stick around, and not to say that things can't get better than
Right.
12.4 offensive points per game, but it's really been trending down fast. The Steelers are 30th in yards per game, 30th in points per game. And they're one of the last teams in terms of EPA and nearly at every advanced metric,
Pretty
whichever one
much.
you want to use. They are there, right there with the Patriots and the Giants, which is not good company these days.
No,
Uh,
not at all.
it is it's not surprising though, Shayne, that he is still here. It's just the way that the Steelers do business. Like
Yes.
they stick to their guns, and they have a certain order of doing things, and that includes not making any drastic in-season coaching change, just something that they really haven't done in the past. And so can't say I'm surprised by it,
No.
but I agree with you. I not mad, just disappointed because I didn't expect it, but I was hopeful, and
Right.
it didn't end up happening. And the reason we were just a couple minutes late to the show actually today is I was covering some news regarding Matt Canada.
Yep.
If you want to check it out, it's up on stillcurtain.com. There was a fan, apparently a disgruntled fan, who just put their house up for sale in North Hills, Pittsburgh, and he absolutely roasts Canada in the description of his home sale. So if you want to check that out, go to stillcurtain.com. Another disappointing, I would say, non-move, kind of, because again, I come to expect these type of things from the Steelers, from Mike Tomlin, is Dan Moore might be back in the starting lineup for the Steelers. And as of this morning, Shayne, Tomlin had still not made a decision. I saw the video from Chris Adamski, the reporter, who said that he talked to Broderick Jones, and Jones said, I don't know. He's like, we don't know. That's basically the response he gave. There has not been a decision made at left tackle, and the Steelers play a football game in a couple of days.
You see, this is one of those decisions that I just could never imagine the Steelers having so much difficulty with. And we've talked about it with other players this year,
Mm-hmm.
especially, and really the past couple of years. But there's no decision to make here, Tommy. We saw
Mm-hmm.
the tape. Like, someone put out a fake quote from Broderick saying, "Yeah, man, I don't know. Put on the tape. It's pretty obvious to me." Like, it was obviously like a fake quote. But
Yeah.
like but if he said that, I'd be like, "Yeah, don't say that, but you're right." Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's one of those, like, I'm not going to tell you to say that because
Mm-hmm.
that's not good to say. But if you did it, I'd be like, "Yeah, you're right." That's
Mm-hmm.
what it comes down to. And yeah, granted, it's one game and some plays before that and everything else, but it was the best game by a tackle for this team in I don't know how long, right? Like, that's just the
Yeah, it was
truth
a
of the
good game.
matter.
Yeah.
And it's
Mm-hmm.
not even that he was like spectacular necessarily, but he was not the problem for the offense, which frankly Dan Moore's not been able to say at any point this season. And to insert him back in the lineup, one, I think it's one of those like insults your football intelligence moves that this team has become very famous for me for the past couple of years. But then also it's a disservice to Dan Moore, who just clearly doesn't have it right now. It's a disservice to the rookie that you drafted with the 14th overall pick. Like, why are we pretending like this guy is some like third round pick that, oh, you don't know if he's going to be ready, or you don't know if he has what it takes? Like, he clearly does, like from an athletic standpoint. And that's enough for me to say, listen, you got to go do it right now, because we're trying to win. But we're also trying to develop these guys. And the fact that both things get better, you get to develop your tackle, but also probably just, again, get better play. It feels like a no-brainer.
Yeah, Shayne, this decision is easy for 31 other teams.
Literally,
I think.
yeah, it's insane.
We talked about on the curtain call yesterday. If you want to check out that
did.
episode, it's on our YouTube channel. Shayne and I do a lot of ranting about the Dan Moore situation.
We do.
Right there. Not that it's Dan Moore's fault. Again, I don't want to
it is what it is.
Dan Moore, because again, Dan Moore, I think, still is a successful pick as a mid-4th rounder. Like, that is the type of guy you're hoping to get, like a swing caliber type tackle. The Steelers are wrong, though, however, for forcing him to be a starter of 37. Dan Moore has started 37 of 37 games that he's played in a Steelers uniform. He shouldn't have to do that.
No.
And I know that he wants to. I know obviously Dan Moore wants to be the starter, but he's not qualified for the job anymore. He just really isn't. If you look at him and compared to, this is why it's so important to cross compare to other NFL teams. You can't just say, oh, how is he doing compared to where the Steelers were before, whatever. Look at what other teams are doing. When other teams out there have a Trent Williams, or they have guys that are very, very capable at the position, and you're not getting a fraction of that from your starting tackle, it's too important of a position not to get an upgrade. And the Steelers have that upgrade. They got Broderick Jones. There's a reason they traded up to the 14th overall pick to draft him. It just the answer to me just seems so easy. And I think to every other fan as well, Broderick is more talented. It's clear to see on film, just more athletic, stronger, more core strength. He's just a better football player. And if the Steelers do indeed go back to Moore, that's going to be a very questionable decision, and one will be met with a lot of scrutiny from everybody in Pittsburgh media, I would have to assume. It just blows my mind, though, that not even necessarily that, Shayne, but the fact that a decision hasn't been made. Like, who are you trying to fool? Like, are you trying to not show your hand or whatever? Because you certainly don't care about that when we call offensive plays or anything. So what does it matter? I don't think the Rams are going to care too much who you deploy there. I think it's more beneficial for Dan Moore or Broderick Jones to know what their role is going to be for Sunday. So I just can't rack my brain around that one. Some of Tomlin's responses during his Tuesday press conferences this year, Shayne, have been very underwhelming, I'd have to say.
Yeah, I think he knows that the general perception of this team is not good. And I think he's just trying to keep everything close to the vest. And like, there's an element of that I can respect and understand, but like, this is one of those decisions where, like, if you've made it, there's no reason not to tell everyone, unless you are making a decision that you know the fan base is going to be mad about, right? Like, and the media is going to be mad about. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe he knows Dan Moore's junior starting, but he's like, I don't want to say that right now because there'll be 3 more days of articles about why I'm an idiot and why this is bad. Like, and if that's the case, like, I guess it doesn't matter that much, because again, as long as the guys know and they're just being told not to say it or something, like, that's fine. But like, it doesn't make any sense, right? That's just what it comes down to with this particular decision, especially.
Yeah, and the early reports from Nick Fehrenbaugh was that Dan Moore was indeed taking the starting reps at left tackle, which, again, not something that I like to see, especially after how Broderick performed in his first ever NFL start. You would have to assume that after one game, the arrow is going to be pointing up for Broderick. After 37 games, and you're now midway through your 3rd season, the arrow is not pointing up anymore for Dan Moore. In fact, it has gone down. I think Moore has played the worst football of his career, albeit against a tough schedule. But it's just the way that it is. It's very easy to make this. I think this decision would be very easy for me, Shayne, if I was the one calling the shots, but we'll see what Tomlin decides there. Other Steelers news this week: Pittsburgh has released, or is going to, in the process of, at this point in time, releasing cornerback Desmond King. This comes as a big disappointment to a lot of Steelers fans. Obviously, King was an all-pro player early in his career. That was back in his 2nd season. So we're a ways removed from that now. It's kind of like saying Keanu Neal was something like that. So, but we did expect more than what we got from him, right? Like, we knew that there was some injury stuff going on. We thought that he was past that and that he was going to finally start seeing some playing time, because, I mean, let's face it, Shannon Sullivan has been pretty awful for the Steelers, and all cornerbacks not named Joey Porter have. So it didn't seem like it should be a hard route for King to find the field. However, he's going to be released from the Pittsburgh Steelers after playing a grand total, Shayne, of one defensive snap, and a handful of special team snaps in a Steelers uniform. Is that justified? Obviously, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, though.
That's my only thing is I'm hesitant to judge this move too harshly because we don't know what he looked like in practice, how he was picking the scheme up.
Sure.
We just don't know, right? And unfortunately, I'm still hesitant to believe that he's worse than Chan Sullivan or worse than some, like even playing outside corner than some of the other guys. Like that, I will say, would be surprised if he was actually worse than them. But if they didn't feel comfortable putting him out there, and if they weren't sure that he's going to be able to perform, then it is what it is. It was a pickup after a cut by the Texans. Like maybe he just doesn't have it anymore. Maybe that's what it is.
He might not.
Yeah, and I don't know for sure. I'm hoping the best for him because I do think he's a really cool player, really fun player, but just didn't work out for the Steelers, I guess.
I just have to, I'm almost laughing out loud, Shayne, because of the irony of the situation.
Yeah.
Like somehow they could recognize that Des King doesn't have it anymore.
Apparently.
How do you not recognize that Levi Wallace doesn't have it anymore?
That's why I'm hesitant to say for sure that he doesn't.
So
because,
I mean, if he truly was a notch below those players in practice, that's pretty concerning. He probably won't get another job. And so, but I do find that's the whole situation a little bit ironic because the Steelers have, again, just like the left tackle situation, you've got a more talented cornerback on the bench than anybody that's in your starting lineup. Oh, yeah. He's having a hard time finding the field for guys who are performing at a very low level right now, that being Wallace and Sullivan and even Patrick Peterson, and just all these guys have just been so underwhelming. So King is out the door, and in a corresponding move, the Steelers are signing Darius Rush off the Kansas City Chiefs practice squad. So that means he needs to be on Pittsburgh's active roster now. I like this move. I know that some people aren't going to care too much about it. I'm going to temper my expectations, Shayne, because this will be Rush's third team since being drafted in the fifth round back in April.
Yeah.
But I was really high on Rush, and I don't know what happened to him. And maybe he just doesn't have it all together. Maybe he's lacking something when it comes to figuring out the defenses or whatever he needs to do. But the guy's just so talented, like 6'2", long arm cornerback, 4.36 speed is unreal for a player of his size. And I just went back and looked at the consensus draft board, Shayne, because I was curious to where he was. He was 62nd, I believe, overall, 69th, I think it was 69th overall on the consensus board. And that is a board that Marcus Mosher came up with, comprised of the rankings of Mel Kiper Jr., Todd McShay, Pro Football Focus, Daniel Jeremiah, Dane Brugler, like all of the big names collectively, their average grade where they had them in this draft. They thought he was a day 2 player. He ended up going the 5th round, and now he's on his 3rd NFL team. I mean, can he become something for the Steelers? Can he be the guy eventually across from Joey Porter Jr.? Is that just way too wishful of thinking considering the situation he's coming from?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, probably. I think it's probably got to be a mental aspect of the game thing with him because you talked about it. He was a guy that I mocked to them a couple times actually in the 2nd and 3rd round because he has the physical traits that Steelers typically look at: corner, bigger, faster. Well, they used to look for that. We'll see. I don't know about now, but with Levi Wallace and all those guys. But in terms of like the prototype for the younger corners on the roster, like that's kind of what it seems like they're interested in. Drafted Corey Trace, obviously, too, another big, long athlete, like obviously Joey. So it fits the mold of what they seem to be searching for the future. But I do wonder, is it simply just he just doesn't get it? Is it a issue where maybe he's struggling to understand, like I said, route concepts or trying to figure out where he's supposed to be out on the field at all times? Is he a guy that maybe you just have to stick on somebody and say, follow him, like make it simpler for him? I don't know. I mean, you'd think it'd be a little bit easier for him in our system where you're going to be playing more man coverage. Maybe that'll help him if he does have to get on the field. But this feels like a guy they just want to kind of stash, keep him on the active roster. Maybe they'll see if he can play some special teams, use that speed in some way, that type of thing.
Yeah, it's certainly the type of move that I like to make, Shayne, because it gives you
low
some
risk.
upside at the very least. It gives you, yes, it's a low risk. And you could say, if this guy, it's always a big if, but if this guy turns out he could be a quality player because the traits are so spectacular. Now, obviously that doesn't make him bust proof. We've seen guys very similar to him, like the Kevin Kings of the world, who are just not good football players, and that's just what you end up getting, and that very well could be the case with Darius Rush. If they do, when they do go out and poach players from opposing practice squads, these are the types of ones that I like to do. I don't like to get the guys that are capped out. Yeah, if you get a capped out corner who is 5'10" and change with short arms and a bad athlete, like the Chin and Sullivan type, if you will, those players to me is just they rarely work out. And so when you do take a flyer and something does work out, more often than not, it's because the guy has amazing traits and then he eventually gets it. I don't know if Darius Rush will ever get it or not. What we do know is that Joey Porter looks good so far. If he ends up being that guy, that long-term left cornerback for the Steelers, what the hope is, Shayne, is, man, maybe between Darius Rush or Corey Trice, maybe one of the two, one of the two, because the treats are both so phenomenal for both of those players who, again, many believed that both of those guys could be day 2 corners this in the 2023 draft as well. If one of those guys can get it, that would be awesome. Chances are you're probably going to have to go out and invest high in the cornerback position again anyway. But I don't mind the move, especially now that King is gone. Let's go bring in a guy that's kind of the opposite, that just has just traits galore. So we'll see how that works out for them. If you guys are joining us here in the live, if you guys are joining us here live on YouTube, please drop a question for us in the live chat. We would love to get to any questions or comments that you might have, and we'll get this discussion going here. All right, let's start with our first discussion topic of the day here before we get into our Steelers versus Rams preview. Shayne, the Steelers roster is mostly back together, and it's mostly healthy outside of Cam Hayward, who could be returning to the field in a couple of weeks. But right now, what we know is the Steelers are getting back some starters. Deontay Johnson's returning, Pat Freiermuth. Let's break these down one at a time, and we're going to talk about kind of the impact that we think this will have on the team. Now, obviously, Deontay Johnson was lost back in the third quarter of week 1, and so we didn't really get to see. I kind of doubt, Shayne, that the offense would have changed a whole lot anyway, knowing what we've seen the first 2 years. But Johnson's presence should help in some way. I mean, this guy, he's always been one of the best route running receivers in the league. He has his inconsistencies at the catch point and with yards after the catch stuff. But what do you think his return is going to mean for a Steelers offense that is very much struggling at this point?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it a little bit yesterday on the curtain call as well, if you guys check that out. But I think that it's going to help in the sense that right now, Kenny Pickett doesn't have answers to the test for this offense. He doesn't have places he can go consistently other than the tough stuff to George Pickens, right? Which, granted, that's a higher throw than most guys throwing those types of balls to the sideline down the field are. But that's really his only, like, okay, I can rely on this. Like, that's the only thing this offense tends to do well right now. So having another guy who can win early and can win, in multiple ways should theoretically help. And that's assuming he is willing to target him a lot, which we think he will, of course, because he's been a high target guy his whole career pretty much. So if he can just give him an underneath option that isn't just like a curl for 5 yards, or isn't just like, if it's something that can get this offense moving a little bit more consistently, that's going to be huge, because throwing to him is a higher percentage play than most other things this offense has done during Canada's time. So you hope it's just, honestly, they need to get the chains moving a little bit more, if nothing else. Like, if you're not going to score a ton of points, like, possess the football for a little while, and like, don't punt on your first 7 possessions every game. Like, that's it's just, I think it's going to lead to a little bit more time of possession, a little bit more production in the passing game. And if that's all it is, then fine. But like, they need something, and you assume it's going to at least provide that.
Yeah, he's going to help him by default, Shayne, because he is such a good route runner and he can create on his own, unlike any of the other receivers on the roster can do. But again, it comes down to usage. Like, I think that there was a chance that during his absence that Calvin Austin could have helped them out a lot more than what he did. He obviously had the huge catch on the Sunday Night Football game, but since then didn't really do much. But the usage is important too, because again, when you're using Austin on like these deep comeback routes, like driving the ball to the sideline, and you're trying to ask your 5'7" and change receiver to box out defensive backs, like, you have to use these players to their skill set. If you do that, I think everybody benefits from that. But I do think that kind of by default, Johnson's going to help them out a little bit just because he's the most experienced receiver, not named Allen Robinson, who's kind of washed at this point.
Yeah.
And he's the only guy that can routinely create separation. So let's see if we can. I mean, what I will say, Shayne, is so far you can go look at next gen stats. Every single game, and this is nothing new. We've seen it dating back to Roethlisberger's last year. There's just nothing going across the middle. Like we have got to find ways to engineer these passes across the middle of the field because you're limiting your offense so greatly when you decide not to do that. And I think that these receivers can offer you something after the catch. Like even like a George Pickens, who is scrutinized for his inability after the catch. We saw that he actually has some ability after the catch because he can long stride past people and he's shiftier than he looks. And so just give him the opportunity to do so. Like that's what these high-powered offenses are going towards, and the Steelers are kind of the opposite way. And in fact, there was a graphic released just this morning, I believe, on tight window throws, and Pickett is in a tier of himself when it comes to being forced to make all of these tight window throws. Yes. He has the highest percentage of tight window throws in the NFL right now. I'd like to see his job get a little bit easier by allowing the receivers to work in space.
Yeah, and I will say too, like with routes over the middle, I just want to see, like, could we get some mesh or something? Could we get some crosses, like something, right? Like it's crazy that we don't run any of those concepts that could possibly get somebody free, like not even exactly over the middle of the field, but with enough space before they hit the sideline where they can actually do something once they catch the ball. Like if it feels like such a no-brainer move to do in the NFL nowadays, and they're just like, yeah, what if we don't? Like, what if we don't do that? I wanted to put on this comment here too.
Jacob chimes in, thoughts on possibility of ownership getting involved with the incompetency of Mike Tomlin. Yeah, I mean, I think they've got such a good relationship at this point. Anytime you're 16 plus years together, and the fact that Tomlin does have the history that he has, again, it kind of comes back to what we were talking about right at the beginning of the show. The Steelers have a very particular way of doing things. Mm-hmm. I think at some point they could, but I think the situation would have to be worse than a 3-2 record, worse than the situation that they've been in for several years now. Again, Tomlin has been good enough to get them to that 500 or so mark, but it hasn't gone really above and beyond. But yeah, I think the discussions about that are justified at this point. It's kind of one of those things that I'll believe it when I see it, just because I know how the Steelers organization operates.
Yeah, and like he mentions, like when it comes to not firing Canada / adjusting, like I think the problem is that the Matt Canada firing decision is also partly to do with ownership. Like I don't think they want to fire somebody and pay them to be not coaching for us. Mm-hmm. And like that's why like I really kind of gave up on the idea of actually having a new offensive coordinator necessarily, or like firing Matt Canada, but more so changing who's calling the plays on the staff, like having them still be on the staff and doing things, just not calling the plays. And even that didn't happen, unfortunately.
Yep, I know. It's one of those things. We're just gonna have to deal with it as long as the Rooney family is there. Mm-hmm. I don't know if their philosophy is going to change in terms of some of these things. So maybe it will eventually, and they'll kind of scrap some of these things that they've done for a long time and start doing what some of the other teams are out there are doing. But it's hard to believe that's going to happen, like I said, until we see it happen. Let's talk about Pat Freiermuth for a minute. Also, he confirmed to the media that he is healthy. He's ready to go. He probably could have played, he said, last week if the Steelers didn't have a bye, but he appreciated having that extra week off to rest and get that hamstring back in order before he takes the field. This has been arguably, Shayne, the most disappointing overall player on the team so far this year. And it's not that it's all Freiermuth's fault. I just think that the Steelers, like we talked about yesterday on the show, they're just misusing this player, having him as an inline blocker, throwing screens to him. I mean, what happened to the Pat Freiermuth that we saw getting like these chunk plays on deep posts over the middle of the field, getting these like 75-yard performances? Like there's been nothing from him this year. And we also talked about how Freiermuth, he's going to be losing a lot of money if things don't pick up for him here soon. Can the Steelers get him back on track? Can they utilize him as that weapon? Because really before, prior to this, Shayne, he was really the only consistent weapon that you had over the middle of the field.
That's the thing that's really so frustrating, is like, this isn't like, it's not like we signed him out of free agency and we had expectations for what he would do. This is a player that's
Yeah.
obviously been on the team for the past few years, has been used effectively in the past, despite this offense being bad. And it's like he just decided, and Canada's just like, yeah, I don't really want to do that with him anymore. Like, I don't want him to be a part of the offense. It's like, why? Like, what did he do something we don't know about? Like, is he in the
Mhm.
doghouse with this team? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, he's one of the few players you know exactly what his skill set is, you know how to take advantage of it. And again, like other than not getting him even more targets, there's really I didn't have any gripes with how they used him the past couple of years. Like he was an
Mhm.
effective tight end. He's one of the better players in terms of racking up receiving yards in the league at the position last year. It just I don't understand. Like unless there's something else we're missing or something that we don't know, I just don't get it. Like that's just what it comes down to. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen him be a really efficient player before. One of the most efficient receiving tight ends in the league. And
Yeah.
in fact, each of the first 2 years, he's graded out as a top 9 tight end, not even close to being on that track right now. You just wonder why you wonder why the usage has changed entirely. And maybe it will get back on track. And maybe there's been more opportunities there. And I've watched the tape, I've watched the all 22. But I didn't really pick up on that. If there was like a bunch of missed opportunities to fire him with, it more so to me, Shayne, seems like you kind of just are misusing the player right now. And I think that you need him to be the first read on a lot of these routes. And he should be the guy that can reel in the ball over the middle of the field and then throw some guys off of him and get some yards after the catch, because he actually led the Steelers by a good margin in yards after
Yeah.
the catch last year. And you look at like yards after the catch per target, he was by far the leading receiver in that department for this team. Not that it was a high bar to clear, because
No,
the
no.
Steelers were the worst in the league in yards after the catch. Is something that they have to improve on. And unfortunately, I don't think that Canada's offensive game plan is caters towards that at all. Let's talk about Cam Hayward for a second, Shayne. There has not been any updates on him, but just doing the math from what we knew from the injury from the beginning. So Hayward had the groin tear, was said to sideline him 8 weeks. Well, that happened back in week 1, and we are entering week 7. So we have to assume that within these next couple of weeks, Hayward could make his way back onto the football field. We saw Watt return, obviously, last year with a pec tear, and so different injuries,
Yeah.
obviously, but maybe close to the same timing. I think Hayward's return it's much needed right now for a defensive line that struggles to stop the run. I think the edge players are terrific for the Steelers right now, but outside of Keanu Benton, you have just nobody who is a consistent force in the middle at all.
Yeah, and him coming back, like there's obviously a lot of repercussions of that are going to be good. It's obviously like you said, the run defense consistency, the pass rush is still going to be an improvement, of course, with him being back in the lineup too. Not that the guys with the pass rush like Ogunjobi and Ben have been bad by any means, but Hayward's just a different level of player, obviously,
Yeah.
right? So you expect all that to get better. You know, the amount better it gets, it's just like we've seen this team struggling to run with him out there. So I think it's more so like it's going to give them a higher floor where there's going to be less opportunity
Yeah.
for teams to really run over them. But we'll see how much better the run defense especially gets. But again, the pass rush is just going to get better. It's going to remain the strength of the team. As long as the edge guys are healthy and Hayward gets back in here, we're going to see this team be a consistent top 3 pass rush the rest of the year. That's really I think the biggest thing is that it's going to elevate that group even more as a pass rushing unit.
Yeah, and so the Steelers are getting pretty much everybody back, assuming that they can avoid an injury or so this next maybe 2 weeks out for Cam Hayward still. And if that's the case, and they can avoid injuries till then, you'll have essentially a healthy roster across the board. But the big question then, Shayne, becomes: will this be enough? I don't think that all the problems that the Steelers are experiencing right now we can trace back and say, oh, if they would have only had this player or that player. I mean, the Steelers are 3-2. I think they're very, very fortunate to be 3-2, considering you're scoring 15 points a game, not even offensive, 12.4 on offense, and you're allowing 22 a game. Your point differentials in the negative. Your EPA is bad. Your quarterback's EPA is bad. I mean, all signs point to them being like the 24th to 27th best team collectively in the league right now. How big of a difference is it going to make having a healthy roster? Because we do know that Hayward is a top 5 player. Deontay, you can argue, because the offense runs through him so much, you could argue that he is a top 5 player in terms of importance to the team. Freiermuth is obviously an important piece who was a big part of their offense last year. Will it be enough to take a noticeable step forward? Or are we going to see the same exact team we've been seeing?
I think the ironic thing is that with all these guys back, we're probably closer to the 9-8 team we were last year in terms of overall quality versus
Mhm.
the 1-4 team we've played like and the 3-2 team we are, right? So
Yeah.
I think it'll help them hold serve. Where like I doubt they get significantly worse record wise throughout the year because as long as they stay healthy, this is a team that wins ugly and finds ways to do that. If they can get enough of those games where they can just kind of drag it out and figure it out at the end, then they'll get to their 9 wins or so. But again, I think the problem is this roster when fully healthy. If you look at it on its face value, it's a playoff roster in my opinion. I know the corners are tough and all that stuff, but like it's an overall playoff caliber roster. But the coaching is not getting it done, especially in terms of the offensive coordinator and the defensive coordinator. Realistically, like Terrell Austin, he's he doesn't do anything to move the needle, right? He goes out there and he
Mhm.
lets his players just kind of do it for him. And there's an element of that that I understand. Like you have all these great pass rushers and you have a really good defensive line in general. You have an improved linebacker group. But at some point, you got to move the needle for your team. You got to come up with some new ways to attack offenses. So that way, your secondary, especially if you're going to keep playing these
Mhm.
corners, are not getting decimated. And we're going to talk about it here in a little bit, but I am terrified of the Rams because guess who's really, really good at calling plays and figuring stuff out against good defenses? Sean McVay. He's real good at that. He's going to be able to find holes in this team. And unfortunately, he doesn't really even have to look that hard because we all know who it is and then who that player is going to be that gets targeted a lot. And we'll talk about it. But will the healthy roster be enough to get them where they want to go? Probably not. Will it be enough to serve and kind of keep them where they've been? Probably.
Yeah, I think you hit that on the head, Shane, because I think that if all goes well, I think that they probably are, even with a healthy team, they probably are that 9-8 team,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. And their record right now is better, obviously, than how they have been playing. Um, but you talked about it like with the coaching staff. Like, I still think that that is the biggest hindrance with this team. And not that they don't have holes in their roster, they've got some massive ones. Like, I
They
think
do.
Mason Cole is playing very poorly right
Yeah.
now. One of the worst centers in
I
the
mean,
league
I
this year,
might be
just
ready
on
to see
pace.
Spencer Anderson here soon if they don't want to move someone over or something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually in the process of writing an article about some roster shakeups that
Yeah.
should happen for the Steelers. And something that I'm going to suggest, I'll give you a little teaser for that one, is I'm okay if the Steelers want to try a little experiment and say, James Daniels, you were a center all through
Mm-hmm.
Iowa. This is what
Yep.
got you drafted high.
That's
This
the
is
other
what
thing.
your body type and everything projected as in the NFL. Why not try it out? Because I think that Mason Cole, you can make a case that he's been the worst center in the league right now. And when that pressure comes
Yeah.
up the middle, there's no hope for Kenny Pickett. And guess
Yeah.
who he goes against this week?
Yeah. Aaron
So
Donald.
he gets a
Yeah.
fun matchup against Aaron Donald, which we're going to talk about here
Yeah.
in a little bit. But there are definitely holes around the roster. I think that there will be some improvements. I don't know if we'll see as drastic of a change like last year was like, oh, this was a 2-6 team, and
Right.
now they were
No.
7-2 down
No.
the stretch. I don't think it will yield those type of results. But I think that they can, again, if Tomlin does what he wants to do, they can play ball control offense and play decent defense and yada yada, the stuff that kind of gets you to maybe a wild card spot and then gets you out in the first round of the playoffs because your offense is not explosive enough to beat any actual playoff teams. So we'll see what happens there. I'm not trying to give up hope altogether, but again, now 39 games of Matt Canada. We've seen Terrell Austin for a while now, and you talked about him as well. When we can look at defensive coordinators like Dan Quinn, like Jim Schwartz, and that's the standard. Like Terrell Austin is coming up way short of that, and those guys have those defenses have plenty of pieces to work with, more than what the Steelers do. I mean, those defenses are more talented than the Steelers. I'll come right out and say it.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got talent on the Steelers defense too. You've got TJ Watt, you've got Alex Highsmith and Minkah Fitzpatrick, and yet your plan though is every single time, every single play, I'm going to line these guys up essentially in the same exact spot, with the exception of a few snaps when Highsmith and Watt drop back into coverage, and that's about it. You're not getting a ton of creativity there. Whereas like you watch the Miles Garrett and Micah Parsons, they're moving all around and finding whatever matchup is best for them. They're running stunts all the time. Just the type of things that we would like to see more, a little bit more creativity on the defensive side of the ball as well. I know I kind of went on a little bit of a rant there, but let's talk
Understandably
about
so.
this, Shane, because the trade deadline is less than 2 weeks away now. A trade deadline is on Halloween this year. All moves must be finalized by 4 p.m. Eastern time. Should the Steelers make a trade? Are they in that position? We talked about this a little bit yesterday. So if you want to catch it in more detail on yesterday's show, you can check that out again. But are they in a position to make a trade? And if you make a trade, is it a Chase Claypool like trade where you're saying, all right, I don't believe in us, or this somebody's offering a lot for X player, or can I get some capital for a guy who is not going to be part of the long-term future? Or is it going to be a trade where I need to plug a hole right now? I need to get a corner that can play. I need to get I don't know if somebody's going to give you a starting offensive lineman, but is it one of those type of trades that they should make, or should they stand pat, Shayne?
I mean, honestly, I think the problem is with this team specifically. Now, we don't know about Khan because he did make the Claypool trade, which was, I mean, a no-brainer, but still he made it.
Yeah, it was.
We don't know what his level of urgency is or his level of risk that he's willing to take is, but I don't want them to make a trade because I feel like it would be a trade that is either pointless mostly or a short-sighted one, right? Like the 5th-round pick for a guy who, isn't playing for another team, but maybe you think can contribute to your team or whatever it may be. If they're going to make a trade, I want it to be either a relatively big swing at a position that they can, grow with that player a little bit. If they get a corner, I don't know who would be on the market. There's been a lot of Surtain talk. He's not getting traded by the Broncos. Like, I just can't imagine that. So, obviously if he's on the market, we'll listen. But, but other than getting a big name corner or, a young player that has a lot of room to develop, I'd rather them just stay pat. This is not a team that is a player or two away from doing anything. Unless it's going to be for a future move, like a team that or a move that was going to help them in the future as well. Let's just not do anything right now.
Yeah, and that's always kind of been my mindset as well, Shayne. Like I kind of go in with the idea of, if I don't believe this team is a Super Bowl contending team, which unfortunately I do not,
No.
Then I think that your idea should be, boy, you can't go and trade valuable assets for your future for a chance to win now. And like you said, it would have to be a young player. It'd have to be one with multiple years left on a rookie deal still, so that you don't have to immediately turn around and take the double gut punch, essentially, where I'm giving up good capital and I'm turning around and making him one of the highest paid players in the league. I'd rather have the capital. I'd rather go backwards the other way, because unfortunately I don't think this team is close enough yet. I think you're a cornerback or two away. I mean, you need at least one boundary cornerback. You need a slot cornerback. You need a center. You need a right tackle. And not that everything has to be perfect, but I'm just talking, those are just the glaring holes, like the ones that are
you need
really, really bad right now.
Like a league average player at this point, at least.
Yeah, I think so, because they certainly don't have that at those positions. And I think going out and making a move for one guy probably isn't going to swing that a whole lot, unless you did multiple things before the trade deadline. So right now, Shayne, I would have to lean towards no. This might be a topic that you and I kind of dive into a little bit more next week, because it'll be rapidly approaching, and we might start seeing some things around the league. So it will be interesting. It certainly was last year at the deadline. All right. If you're a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers and you would like to support the Steel Curtain podcast, please consider subscribing to the Steel Curtain podcast on YouTube. We appreciate all of your support. All right, Shayne, on to our preview for Week 7 Steelers versus Rams. This is an interesting matchup, and I want to share my thoughts on this. We're both going to, obviously, and we're going to give our game predictions here in just a minute. But let's first talk odds for this game. The Steelers are fresh off their bye week. The Rams are coming off of a win to the Arizona Cardinals. They just got done playing Josh Dobbs last week. Now the Steelers are traveling to the West Coast for this game, in which they will be 3-point underdogs. Over under for this game is set at 43.5 points. Shayne, is a 3-point line +3 for the Steelers. Is that fair?
I honestly don't think it's fair, but not because it's too many. I think it's
not too generous.
They're being generous, because let's be honest,
like
that's basically saying that they think these teams are even on a neutral playing field.
Yes.
Maybe like overall roster quality, sure, because the Rams have a ton of young players who are unproven. They have a defense that has basically 2 guys on it that anybody knows anything about, and that's being generous. Aaron Donald's really the main one. Like, I get that. However, this is about as nightmare matchup as you can get, especially when you're talking about the Steelers defense, which is the reason why we're winning games, versus the Rams offense, which is the reason they're winning games. Something's got to give. And in the NFL, typically the offense is the one who ends up winning those games, right? Now, obviously, we just saw the Niners-Browns game where clearly the better offense than us especially, but in general, wasn't able to overcome the great defense. But
Mhm.
as much as it pains me to say it, that Browns defense through 6 games is maybe one of the best we've seen in the last 20 years in terms of
It's been
statistical
good. Yeah.
output. We're not quite there in terms of stopping power. Now we have big plays, and that could end up making a huge difference in this game, especially because Matthew Stafford does like to throw the ball to the other team sometimes. He is willing to do that if it means big plays for his offense too. So unless we capitalize on several mistakes from him, this could get ugly in terms of the offense versus defense matchup.
Yeah, it is a very interesting matchup for sure because you've got a really high-powered passing offense. I think that Stafford has had a really strong start to his
Very
season, and
much
you've
so.
got
Yeah.
he's got 2 receivers that he loves now too,
Yes.
and Cooper Kupp is back, and then Puka Nacua, who's had an amazing
First
start
on the
to his
scene.
NFL
Yeah.
career. So let's talk about some of these matchups here, Shayne,
Yes.
and how Steelers, how we believe they will fare this Sunday against them. The first one, I kind of have a feeling what you're going to say, and we touched on this just briefly. Mason Cole versus Aaron Donald. Is that fair? Is that it's? I feel like we should be given some kind of handicap for this one, but I think the Steelers are going to have to draw a little tension his way.
Yeah, unless Mason Cole can duplicate himself mid-play, I don't think that's going to
I'm not
go
sure
go
if
well.
that would matter.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not. Yeah, he'd probably just split the two, but I just they have to target him. They have to do some wild stuff to block him. That's all I'll say. Like
Mhm.
I don't know what Pat Meyer's plan is. I don't know what the offense's plan is because I don't think they really know either.
Mhm.
But like, if they cannot allow Mason Cole to be the primary blocker on Aaron Donald, maybe even one time. Like unless the play is going
Yeah.
away from him, even then, like you're still probably smart to just throw an extra guy his way at some point because the rest of the Rams defensive line is very much improved and they're not playing bad necessarily through 6 games, but he's the guy that if you can at least keep him from destroying your offense, you're gonna have a shot to move the ball.
Mhm.
Do I have any reason to believe that they can do that? No, not really at all. So yeah, as far as specifically the Cole versus Aaron Donald matchup, it's not really even the same. They're not playing the same sport, basically. Like that's just, I mean, that's not trying to be mean to Mason Cole, but like that's the case for a lot of guys that play Aaron Donald. So it's not even just him, but like the way he's playing this year,
Mhm.
it's not good.
Yeah, and everybody and their mother knows, Shayne, that this
Yeah.
is the guy. This is the guy that you have to stop on
Yes.
this team. But it's hard because he does rush from the interior, and so even if
Mhm.
you can try to help him with a guard chipping on him as well, double team blocks. But if they start running stunts and stuff, you could be in trouble there. So unlike like an edge defender where you can just line up a tight end on his side every time and get a true double team block there, it is harder. I feel like in some ways, blocking interior guy, especially a generational one like Aaron Donald, who is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Mhm.
You know what an interesting idea would be, Shayne, is when you're running plays, and maybe a lot of these should be out of shotgun so you can see what's coming, give yourself a
Yeah.
little bit of time. Maybe have like Darnell Washington in the backfield as like you're the reserve
No,
center. And as
that's
soon as Donald gets past you, because he's going to, you are going to be there to be the second guy in line to help block.
I was gonna say, like, they should really, like, in certain situations, have the running back just sprint at Darren Donald as fast as he
Yeah,
can
yeah, be
and
the
try to
double
hit
team
and
right
and
there.
try to hit him in,
Chip
like, the
him in.
side to try to get him a certain direction.
Mhm.
Because like, I don't know, like, the Steelers' offensive line is obviously disappointed, and, like, some of them are starting to pick up a little bit, like, Ciamalo's played better recently. You hope Daniels, now that he's healthy, you hope that he can play better as well, but, like, they're just this is a mismatch, right? And it always
Yeah.
is against any team, really, but like especially
Oh
this
yeah.
team, not great.
Yeah, and even great coaches really struggle with Aaron Donald
Yeah,
because he's just a freakish player, and so I can imagine that the Steelers would too. This is obviously a matchup that certainly favors the Rams here, and if Donald is held in check, I would be very surprised this week, Shayne. But hopefully the damage is kept to minimal, maybe just a handful of pressures and a sack or something that doesn't cost the Steelers a chance to win the game or anything that way. All right, let's talk about the Steelers cornerbacks versus the Rams wide receivers. Another matchup that I am not crazy about. This is a spread passing offense, and there are receivers who can run really good routes on this team. On the other side of the ball, Shayne, we've got cornerbacks for Pittsburgh who have had a very difficult time defending like the intermediate passing game this year, those slants and posts and things like that. It's just not been their forte at all. You look at Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua against essentially what might turn out to be, again, Levi Wallace and Patrick Peterson. I don't like this. And Shayne, I honestly, I'm not sure if there's a team that I really do feel comfortable playing against, but this one I particularly don't like because Stafford has been so accurate. He's gone to the right receiver with the ball, and these guys run such good routes.
Yeah, you mentioned about how you don't know who you would feel good about with this team. Maybe the Patriots,
Maybe them. Yeah,
which we
there
do
we go.
play, which maybe that'll be it. But no, like this is somehow I think even worse of a matchup than the Aaron Donald versus the interior line because like with Donald, like yeah, he's gonna get his probably anyway, but like you can do things to mitigate it. They're not going to do anything to mitigate this. They're going to let their corners go out there and try to just figure it out, and it's not going to work. And there's been a stat floating around or like a mention of this, but the last time Cooper Kupp played in an NFL game and didn't catch a ball was against the Steelers in 2019. Now,
Yep.
I remember that game well because Minka did a bunch of crazy stuff because that's what he does. That's when he was really on one in 2019. And this is not the same team, right? Like this is
No, it is
this is
not.
4 years, and I think even Tomlin like they asked him about is like 2019 was a football lifetime ago.
Yeah.
Correct. That is an accurate statement of that. That's not going to happen this time. Just going to be on like
No.
just so everybody knows, not going to happen. My over under for like what I would personally put on his yardage, you have to sit just at 100 because he's already done it twice in
Oh
two
yeah.
games back.
Yeah.
If he doesn't get 100 yards, it's only because they didn't have to get 100 yards. Like that's kind of what I think about that. Does that suck to say? Absolutely. If anyone would like to argue that with me, go ahead. But I probably just will go ahead and not listen to you. So.
Yeah, and you talked about that 2019 defense. Steelers were number 1 in DVOA defense that year,
Yeah,
and
a
so
little different
they
than
were a
this year.
lot better than they were right now, unfortunately. And not that this defense can't make some improvements, but when we're talking about this cornerback versus receiver matchup specifically, this is again one that certainly does not favor Pittsburgh here. I think that it's I wouldn't be shocked, Shayne, if Cooper Kupp and Puka both had 10 receptions each and we're pushing 100 yards
It could if they
each,
want to.
assuming that Stafford even had to throw the ball that many times because
Right.
they've been successful running too. Now I know that Kyren Williams is banged up. We'll see who kind of if they deploy kind of by the committee there or what ends up happening. But they've just been a good team, and I think I think a lot of the reason you can always look to is because Sean McVay is just a really good coach and he knows how to exploit teams. And you better believe that he's already figured out how to exploit the Steelers before this game happens. And so I have a feeling this will be one of those games where Levi is picked on quite a bit again. A couple other ones here, and I just want to point out Kevin Dotson and Ahkello Witherspoon, both on the Rams, both playing at a quality level. I mean, Kevin Dotson right now is the number 1 graded offensive guard in the NFL, making the switch from the Steelers to the Rams just before the season. I'm happy for the guy. It's unfortunate because it grinds my gears a little bit to know that I think that Dotson was a pretty talented guy. I think he was a big, strong guy who did have a lot of mental errors for Pittsburgh, but it makes you wonder, like, why is he getting it all of a sudden? And why couldn't he do that with that level of consistency in Pittsburgh? And then the other way, Shayne, we have Ahkello Witherspoon, who I was scrutinized a little bit because at the time, when it was time to make a decision, and we knew the Steelers were going to cut either Witherspoon or Wallace, and we knew that it was going to be Witherspoon because his health was such a shady track record there. I still said health record and all, even with your severe hamstring injury that caused you to miss most of the season last year, I would have kept Witherspoon, and I stand by that today. And I think that my assessment of that would have been correct so far. I never saw it with Wallace at all. I think he was a terrible athlete, and you can't get away with that at the cornerback position. Teams have figured that out, and they can expose him whenever they want to now. Witherspoon is a quality athlete with length and also has the ball skills. He just hasn't stayed as healthy as what Wallace has, and that has been primarily the big difference between the two. These two players had the exact same contract right after the draft when the Steelers decided to cut Ahkello Witherspoon. I would have kept Witherspoon. I think that Witherspoon has grossly outplayed him so far. We will see if the Steelers can exploit him at all or if he'll have a quality game against our kind of pedestrian passing offense.
So start with Dotson. So I remember a couple years ago now, one of the first articles I wrote for Still Curtain, I believe, was about how whether Kevin Dotson could become one of the next best guards for the Steelers, because we've always had the great interior players. And I do think the talent has always been there, and he's shown flashes of it. You know, you go back to his rookie year where he was a great pass protector, had some great moments in pass protection, and it just kind of never fully got put together for the Steelers. And I do think it's coaching, a lot of it. I really do. I think also Dotson is just an older player now. He's more experienced. Maybe something just kind of clicked with him to a certain degree. And you're happy for him because again, he got what he wanted. He got a new opportunity to start, and he's taken advantage of it so far. And with Witherspoon, I'm less surprised about him playing well, actually, just because we know this is what he does. He is a every other year corner, and it's almost kind of hilarious. He's basically like a relief pitcher in baseball, where like every other year you're getting like a 2 ERA and like 60 innings. He's saving some games, and then the next year he has like a 6.3 ERA, can't do anything, and you just kind of have to hope you pick him up at the right time. Like that's really what it feels like with him. Now, obviously, he could kind of stay consistent the rest of his career, but he's already a little bit up there in age. I think he's 28 now, 29.
Yeah,
I
I
forget what
believe
it is. So he's probably not going to maintain this level of play for much longer. But he is a very hot and cold player, so I'm not that surprised they caught him at the right time in terms of that.
Yeah, and guys that good for them. They're revitalizing their careers here
Yes.
on another team, and so they're finding success, which is awesome. Hopefully, Steelers don't have an issue with either of them in this matchup. And you look at Dotson. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. But worth noting that the Steelers are playing a couple of former players here. They might want that revenge game, maybe against their team, because again, the Steelers essentially gave up on them. We knew how it ended with Dotson. Like Dotson was in the doghouse a couple times with the coaching staff. And what really did him in, I think, was his comments when the Steelers went out and paid a lot of money to Isaac Seumalo. They said, when you pay that much money, I'm going to the bench, essentially, paraphrasing, of course. So he was not thrilled with his situation. They could kind of use that as fuel, and we'll see what happens this week. I want to talk about one matchup, but we did so many that the Rams are going to exploit us in, Shayne. So I want to throw a matchup out there that the Steelers should greatly have the upper hand, and that is Alex Highsmith versus Alaric Jackson, the left tackle for the Los Angeles Rams. Since Whitworth's departure at like 40 years old, the guy was a beast, like never slowed down. They have not been able to replace that right tackle. Now on the other side, Rob Havenstein's a pretty good, left tackle. On the other side, Rob Havenstein's a pretty good right tackle. Watt still is TJ Watt, and he should be able to get the best of him more often than not. But Highsmith does have a favorable matchup here. And if they do, again, like they always do, decide to shift their attention over to Watt and give him that chip routinely, Highsmith is the guy that's got to be able to create here.
Yeah, and I think he very well could, and I think he should. It's just, again, like we talked about, we're going to talk about a little bit more before we get on to our keys and stuff like that. But if Stafford isn't on the ground a lot, it's not going to go well. Like Highsmith has to win a lot because they're going to help with Watt. Like this is a team that is very smart, unlike some teams that just kind of let him be unblocked and eventually it goes wrong for them. It's very weird that happens still, but whatever. They're going to put attention towards Watt. So if Highsmith can't win consistently, if he can't do what he's been doing really all year and getting consistent pressure and forcing throws, it could get ugly really fast, because as much as I think TJ will have his moments, I think it really will come later in the game if we're hunting after him and not so much early when they're giving him a lot of attention. So Highsmith definitely has to win.
Yep, 100%. If they allow Stafford to get comfortable in the pocket, it's going to be over. Lights out, game over, because they're just going to be able to pick this secondary apart. So quick pressure is going to be the key for the Steelers there. One more matchup, and then we'll get to our keys to the game and make our game predictions. And that is Matthew Stafford, a seasoned veteran quarterback. He's been there. He's won the Super Bowl. He's done it with this current team against Steelers secondary. Now, Shayne, I will say before I get into this, I really thought that there was a chance that the Rams would be one of the worst teams, like a bottom dwelling team this year in the NFL, because you look at their roster on paper, like outside of Stafford, Cooper Kupp, and Aaron Donald, like those are the three guys. The other guys were even hard to name. And I do this full time, Shayne, and I'm always constantly looking at other people's rosters. A lot of the guys I didn't even know about. But then you get a guy like Puka Nacua coming on strong and is on the best pace ever for rookie wide receiver. And you get some other guys that are stepping up. Kyron Williams in the backfield, who has been awesome for them. And it allowed them to go and trade one of the running backs away. Guys are stepping up to the plate, and this has become a quality team, and one on paper that is, quite frankly, a lot better than the Steelers right now. Their point differential is a lot higher than the Steelers. And so Stafford is kind of revitalize his career a little bit after going through those injuries. And he looks healthy. He looks good against the Steelers secondary. This is going to be tough. And we talked about, again, on yesterday's show, how the effect of Minkah Fitzpatrick has kind of just been negated because the corners can't cover for 2 seconds. So Minkah can't really do his job either. How do you think this one's going to go for the Steelers?
I wish I felt better about it, but again, we've harped on it throughout this section of matchups. If the pass rush does not get home, Stafford is going to light us up. That's just the reality of the situation. We cannot guard Cooper Kupp. We cannot guard Puka Nacua probably either. And as much as it's crazy to say, that's just the reality of it. If you cannot get him on the ground multiple times or force bad throws, because the one thing about Stafford that I respect it, but also it is a detriment to his game sometimes. He'll throw you the football a couple times. Like, he is willing to just layer throws into places that really only a few people can make throws, and he's one of them, and he has been throughout his entire career. I think he still is one of those guys. But you have to make up, like, if he does throw you some, you have to catch them basically, right? Because if you don't, if he gives you some easy ones and you don't catch them, he's going to be like, all right, cool, I can get away with that. They're not catching the football. He's just going to keep firing them in there. That's not what you want. You have to get them to be more, not just conservative, but you have to get to a point where, okay, Stafford's starting to make some mistakes. Maybe they're going to take the ball out of his hands a little bit more, try to get him settled down. That'll give you an opportunity to get off the field more. Like, that's all going to be very important. And I don't think it's going to come from the secondary. Like I said, I think it's going to have to come elsewhere, and that's what concerns me.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. I think you hit that perfectly. And one of the other receivers we haven't even talked about is Tutu Atwell, who has made a lot of big plays for them as well.
He gets one rep on Levi Wallace on a go route. It's over.
Oh, man. It's going to look very much like the one that Hollywood had that should have went for a huge touchdown in week 5 as well, because Wallace just blew the coverage and had no recovery speed. All right, Shayne, let's talk about our keys to success. We'll do one on offense, one on defense, and then we'll do our game prediction. So go ahead and give us your key to success. What do the Steelers need to do offensively in order to have a chance to win this game?
Stop punting the first 4 drives every game. Now I'll be so. I mean, that's kind of what it is. But no, I think that they need to start games better. I don't care if it's throwing the ball. I don't care if it's running the ball. It doesn't really matter to me how you do it or what the game plan is for it. If you cannot put up at least like 10 points in the first half, you're going to lose the game probably. Like, especially in a game like this, where, again, I just don't trust the secondary to keep Stafford from putting up points. I don't trust this team to make the types of mistakes the teams have been making against the Steelers that have allowed us to win some of these games. Like, they're going to light us up. They're going to try to come out firing. You have to at least keep pace. You have to give this team that clearly is better on offense in the fourth quarter because of whatever reason, right? I don't care what the reasoning is, it's just how it is. You have to give them a shot going into the fourth quarter that, okay, this game is attainable. We can go ahead and get a lead here late. That has to happen. I don't think it happens unless they start off significantly better than they have in all 5 games previously this year.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, Shayne, we know the offense isn't going to change structurally a lot at this point. So I think that one of the keys here, I'll say my offensive key this week is you've got to be really aggressive, and you've got to take chances. I don't care if that means that Pickett throws 4 or 5 passes that are interceptable type passes.
Turnover worthy plays.
You have to create more plays. You're not going to be able. This isn't going to be a game where you can say, all right, we're going to exchange field goals and we're going to win. I just don't think Steelers defense is going to be able to hold strong enough to do that against a high powered passing offense. So you're going to have to be aggressive in your own right. Go for it on 4th and 1, 4th and 2. If you get to the other side of the field, don't punt the football like Tomlin has been known to doing so often. It's like, all right, take a chance here. Trust your defense. If this doesn't work out, your defense can still stop them from gaining 25 whatever yards they need to get in field goal range the other way. But you have to take these type of risks. And this is what good teams do. They use these analytics. They take risks. They go for it on 4th down. They take shots down the field. They do those type of things to try to exploit the other team. I think the Steelers need to be risk takers this week. I think their philosophy, Shayne, of we're going to run the ball well, we're going to play risk-free football, and we're going to play good defense. It's not going to work against this team if they end up putting 24, 27 points up on you. Then you can throw that philosophy out the window, because the Steelers score 12 points a game. I can't see them outscoring I can't see them outscoring the Rams unless they have a bit of a change in philosophy here.
Yeah, and the worst part about it, before we move on to the keys for defense, is like you talked about how trusting your defense, being willing to go for it on on the other side of the field.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think a guy like Tomlin, who puts so much faith in his defense and trusts them so much, like why would he not do that more? Like he's like, I have a defense that I think can score. I have a
Yeah.
defense that I think can create turnovers. Like I'm gonna be aggressive with these calls. I'm gonna tell Matt like, hey, have a fourth down play ready right now. Like get it ready. Like but he doesn't do it, and it's like Mike,
Yeah.
you have this weird philosophy of like you want your defense to be the reason you win, but you're not willing to trust them to be so you can go be aggressive on offense when you don't have a good offense. It's just so weird.
Yeah. I agree with that completely. And maybe it's more of a lack of trust in the offense, which I
Maybe,
understand that
which like
too.
that I would understand, but at
But
that point,
again,
why not?
Shayne, like if your philosophy is we're trying to get to third and manageable every time, well, from there, if you just want to methodically work the ball down the field, then you need to be willing to go for it on fourth down because you know
have
that
to.
your drive is
It's
going
an
to
extra
stall.
down.
Your drive,
It's an extra
your
down.
drive is going to stall if your philosophy is we are going to get in third and manageable. You can't keep doing that without going for it every once in a while. So I just want to see them get a little bit more aggressive. If it costs them, then it costs them. But I'm telling you what, it's already costing them. They've won games because of their defense. They've won games because of their special teams or a play that Joey Porter made when the game should have essentially been over. And so their defense has bailed them out, Shayne. And I truly think this is a 1-4 team that we're looking at right now. If not for the performance of TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith in those games, those two guys specifically. So they have to find a way to make things work on offense. And you might as well start with being more aggressive if you're not going to change the play calling. All right, Shayne, defensively, what is the one thing the Steelers have to do this week? We already talked about how high powered this passing offense can be and how it's already outperformed expectations of what we thought it was going to be. What do they have to do to slow down Stafford and company?
So one of two things has to happen. Either the pass rush has to be the reason why we win a game again, which again I've harped on it. You could probably find a clip of me saying this exact same thing in every preview basically since week one, saying that the pass rush has to be the reason we win. That of course is one way. The other way is that Levi Wallace finally is so bad that they're like, yeah, let's just throw Joey out there the whole rest of the game, and maybe you can get a couple stops then because there's not going to be a truly wide open player on every play. It really comes down to the secondary playing above expectations or the pass rush just obliterating Stafford and making it hard to throw down the field.
Okay. My key would be, I think the Steelers, this feels like to me one of those games, Shayne, where they're just going to need to rely on 2 or 3 takeaways from their defense.
Yeah, they have to force turnovers.
You cannot exchange blows, and the defense isn't consistent enough because of their inefficiency stopping the run from time to time because of their cornerbacks who are by far the weakest part of the defense. Like,
yeah.
I think the linebacker play has been solid.
It's
Unfortunately,
been fine. It's been totally fine.
It's been okay. And I think they had a good game against the Ravens, but you can still see it doesn't really matter if you've got weaknesses at the cornerback position because of their deficiencies there. I think they're going to have to create a couple of takeaways in order to even be, even to give themselves a chance to win this game this week. So Shayne, let's go right to our predictions, our game predictions for Steelers versus Rams in week 7. But before we sign off for today, give us your game prediction for Sunday with a score prediction or a final score.
Yeah. So I was hesitant to decide like on specifically like what the scoring margin would be because I feel like this game won't be a blowout necessarily like we've seen some of the other losses, but I'm not going to predict this team to beat this team in LA, especially if it was at home. I might be more willing to pick the upset, but I'm going to say 24-14. I think the Steelers offense does just enough early to like make it kind of close, but the Rams pull away because they're just better offense and defense can only do so much. But I do think it's going to be at least a 1 score, if not 2 score loss, unfortunately.
Yeah, Shayne, I would love to say that I believe the Steelers are going to go to the West Coast and beat a high-powered passing offense team right now. I just don't think that this is a good matchup for them at all. Kind of like what we've detailed already in the show. I just think that this is a perfect game for McShay because he will know exactly how to exploit Pittsburgh defense. Defense won't be able to make the necessary adjustments, and frankly they don't have the talent at cornerback, especially when Porter is not out there. And so I just think that this game is kind of going to go south from the beginning. I don't think it's going to look as ugly. I think that they're going to at least come off the plane like they failed to do when they traveled to Houston and lost 30-6 against the Texans.
Not great.
So it'll be better than that, Shayne, but I do have the Steelers losing 27-16. So we're similar in terms of our point deficit there. So that's a 2-score loss. I hope that they're closer than that. I want to see the offense do more. Like, when are we going to see a 30-point game from this offense? When is it going to come, Shayne?
From the offense, I don't know if it'll happen ever with Canada. I think we could score 30 points if we score like twice on defense.
Defensively, yeah. We almost did against the Browns, 26, but it required 14 points on defense.
Yeah, it was. That's what I'm saying. It's like you're going to have to get at least about half of those from defense or special teams. So
unfortunately, those are our predictions. If you guys have predictions, please drop them in the comments, and we'll be sure to look at those later. Thanks for joining us on the show today. We go live every single Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. We also have the Curtain Call show on Tuesday, so join us for that as well. Please follow the YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us. You can follow Shayne on Twitter at Shayne Kubas. You can follow me on Twitter at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Still Curtain podcast wherever you get your podcast. Also check us out on YouTube or ask Alexa to play the Still Curtain podcast. And thanks for listening to the Still Curtain podcast.